Okay, the question was, what should you have in mind if you go to Mikveh before Yom Kippur? What should you have in mind? So I was beginning to describe what Mikveh symbolizes. And of course, there's thousands of pages of information on Mikveh. I'm only telling you one slant. One understanding of Mikveh is rebirth. Now, because you were in a water environment before you were born, and then you came out of that environment, so it's rebirth. And now I was pointing out that Mikveh is the antidote for tumah. Tumah, which is called ritual impurity, whatever that means. I was saying that my first wife had a very interesting definition of tumah as mini kores. Kores means to be cut off from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And someone who's tameh is cut off from contact with holy and consecrated objects, places. Certain types of tumah, you can't go into the temple. Certain types of tumah, you can't eat from the portions of a sacrifice. Kohen who's tameh can't eat truma, which he ought to be able to eat. So tumah means that you're cut off from certain types of relationships with Kadosh Baruch Hu, or with things that carry a Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence because they're holy. Rav Hirsch has a treatment of tumah generally as contact with death. All tumah, he says, is contact with death. And some of them which aren't obvious, for example, let's say a woman who gives birth is tameh, but she had 2 lives, and now she has only 1 life, so she's lost a life. So that's similar to death. A man has a mission, so even appropriately becomes tameh because there's a lot of life there, and the vast majority of it is never going to be realized as life. It's going to be lost. So and contact with death, he says, contradicts a certain aspect of a person's nature that a person was put in the world with free will to do. The idea of being an agent, making things happen, creating things, that's an essential part of this dimension of human life. And death says no. Death says no. It ends. It's over. And to a spiritually sensitive person, that's a shock to come in contact with that. And it needs a recovery. And the recovery is to go through a process that's similar to being born, which means your life comes into full existence. So that's part of the symbolism. Now, I just want to issue one little warning. Some people in other cultures use the concept of rebirth as starting from scratch. I'm a new person. I have no relationship to my past. We are absolutely opposed to such an idea. You never are a new person who's totally disconnected from his past. If you make changes, if you decide that you need to modify your priorities and your values, you build a new stage onto the old, but it grows out of the old. It isn't an abrupt term where you push it aside. And although we mentioned this during Hilchos Teshuva, but I want to take a chance now to just try to make it clear. The Rambam writes that when the person does Teshuva, one of the things that is common to do is to change your name, as if to say, I'm not the person who committed that crime. But even that is only partial. Even that is only in a certain respect. I'll prove it to you because the Rambam also takes a position on a controversial topic. Let's suppose that a person does a transgression, he does Teshuva, he goes through Yom Kippur and confesses it, and then a whole year goes by and he doesn't repeat it. Should he confess that transgression on the following Yom Kippur? So those who say no. The first Yom Kippur took care of it. It's over. Kadosh Baruch Hu forgave you and it's over. The Rambam says yes. Yes, you should. Why? So various reasons are given. One reason is this. I did it. Didn't do it in the last 12 months, but 16 months ago I did it. So I'm the kind of person who can do that. It's within my psychology, it's within my motivational structure to do something like that. Maybe I should be careful. Maybe I should take precautions that I don't go back and repeat it. So it's not as if it's been erased from my history. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about taking precautions to not repeat it. But I'm not liable for the crime in it. I'm not liable to be punished for the responsibility for the crime in it. That's gone. So it's not as if the event didn't take place, but the event, instead of being trait, becomes part. It just becomes an event. No longer threatens me with any negative consequences. But it isn't as if it's not part of my history. So even the idea that I'm a new person has to be taken as within a certain dimension, the dimension of responsibility for the failure and the necessity to repair. No, you don't have the necessity to repair the event. That definitely did take place. So here we talk about rebirth after contact with Tumah. It doesn't mean you become a new person. It means that this depression of your life force that was a result of contact with death, that has to be restored or repaired. And that's what going to Mikveh does. One of the many, many things that going to Mikveh does. So that's one thing to have in mind when you go to Mikveh. Yeah, what else? This is Q&A for the guys who came in. Yeah.
So on Rosh Hashanah, I was very tired. Like I tried learning both nights, so I stayed up pretty late. And when I got up for Rosh Hashanah davening, I was not as into it until Mikvah time, really. I don't know, is there a way to kind of really focus yourself for Yom Kippur?
I think you should sleep more. I think you should sleep more.
It's better to sleep than to stay up, right?
Well, and then the next day not be into it. That's right.
So the davening is more important than you.
Than that learning? Absolutely. There are sometimes you hear Baalei Teshuva say, I really feel guilty about sleeping. Because, all that time I could be serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu, doing something for Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's a colossal philosophical error. Kodesh Baruch Hu didn't make a mistake in creating you needing sleep. And when he told you how he wants you to live, he took into account that you're a person who needs sleep because he created you that way. So of course he's expecting you to sleep. And like the Rambam writes, and Ramchal writes, that if when you go to sleep, you say, okay, I'm going to sleep now, and my alarm is set for this time, I'm sleeping enough so that tomorrow I can do the avoda with strength, with freshness, with concentration, then you are serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu by sleeping. You are serving him when you're sleeping. Because service of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, Rambam implies this, the Ramchal writes this word for word, service of Kodesh Baruch Hu has two dimensions. One dimension is mitzvos. He told you this is what you have to do. And the other dimension is doing whatever is necessary to be able to do the mitzvos. All of that is serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And that being the case, going to sleep, a person should be able to say, I'm doing this for the sake of heaven. I'm doing this for the sake of being able to serve Kodesh Baruch Hu. And for some people, running on a treadmill and playing doubles tennis is something that they need in order to be able to serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu in the best possible way. So one shouldn't feel guilty about having to sleep. The Rambam writes, 7 or 8 hours is normal for a person to sleep. That's the Rambam. So, so certainly something the person shouldn't be embarrassed about. And to say, I'll give you another example of this. People come, let's say, if you come for a year, that's great. The person comes, let's say, for 3 weeks. I've only got 21 days, I've got to make the most of the 21 days. So he pushes himself 18 hours a day, 18 hours a day, and then he crashes. And then he loses. If he had decided to do 14 hours a day or 12 hours a day, then he could have done it for 3 weeks consistently, and he would have been strong the whole time, and he would have ended up with more. So pushing yourself beyond your reasonable limit is not a good idea. It's not a relevant idea. If you do it as a mistake, it's not the world's worst mistake. you're excited, you're energized, you're motivated to do your best, and you're trying to do your best. It's not like eating cheeseburgers, but it is a mistake, and you should try to avoid the mistake. Yeah. What's next? Yeah.
It's a prohibition in Torah to say Hashem's name in vain. When praying, sometimes I make a mistake and I end up repeating Hashem's name. So, in other words, the name I said previously was in vain. So, how is it allowed for me to, knowing that I'm probably going to make a mistake in my prayer, that prayer, like I shouldn't have done the prayer in the first place?
No, I don't think that's right. You make the mistake because why? Because you forgot that you have said it?
I've said it, and then maybe I repeat on accident, or maybe I had to repeat the whole line, maybe like a Shema.
No, you shouldn't feel that way. It's very interesting. I know there's even a machlekes by Kriyas Torah whether if he's read half a pasuk and he made a mistake, we should go back, we shouldn't go back, or should finish the pasuk first, and so on and so on. But I know of people who repeated things in prayer on purpose because they were still saying it. So I don't think it counts as a if it's frivolous, then of course not. We try not to do that. But if it's part of what you're trying to say it appropriately, I wouldn't worry about it. I would not worry about it. Yeah. What's noch? Yeah.
Going back on what you previously said a couple questions ago on the Mikveh and on the Rambam, how we're trying, how we say, we go back and repent for the mistakes that we made even previously and that we've already repented for. Does that mean that the sins, there's like even a remnants of it, like meaning like could that sin still be a part of us? Not like that we can be held accountable to, but could it still be a part of us?
So I think that's exactly the concept that I'm trying to express. Could that sin still be part of us? Well, let me try to put it this way. The action is still a part of us, but the sinfulness of the action isn't part of us. Let me give you an analogy which just doesn't answer it in its context, but let's suppose that a person ate a cheeseburger, right? Suppose I just transform that with a magic wand into he would have died if he didn't eat the cheeseburger. So he had to eat it. It's a mitzvah to eat it. But he ate the cheeseburger, and he might have enjoyed it. Well, okay. He had to eat it. But the fact that he enjoyed it might cost him something later. But he's not guilty for the eating of it. He had to eat it. Eating was right. So is it part of him? Well, the eating of it is part of him, and the pleasure of it is part of him, but the sinfulness of it is not part of him, because the sinfulness for him has been erased. So you have to be very careful. When you talk about things, very often you're not talking about the thing, you're talking about an aspect of the thing. And you have to identify which aspect is relevant. In causality, we talk about events causing events. Strictly speaking, that's not true. It's not an event that causes an event. It's an aspect of an event that causes an event, right? Striking a match caused the match to light, okay? But he struck it with his right hand. That also caused the match to light? If he struck with the left hand, it wouldn't have worked? Probably would have worked, He struck the match at 3 o'clock. The event took place at 3 o'clock. That's part of the nature of the event. If he struck it at 4 o'clock, it wouldn't have worked? Sure, it would have worked. So the time and the hand aren't what caused the flame. It's the pressure of the head on the scraper that causes the flame. The match was colored white. It could have been colored black. The color of the match didn't cause the flame. The event had in it lots and lots of aspects. Only one or certain selected aspects are what are involved in causing the effect. So when you think of the event as a whole, you have to realize, if you're talking about A causing B, you're not dealing with the event as a whole. You're only dealing with a certain aspect of the event. So here too, when you're talking about whether X is part of me or not, you have to say, don't think of X, think of this and this and this aspects of X and take them one at a time and ask yourself whether, for which ones that it applies.
Is that a way to maybe get away from sinning? Like, I mean, you can put up fences and stuff, but there are certain sins that like are somewhat human nature, go towards it. So could that be a way to get rid of it, like analyzing it, like each step of it individually?
I think that's right. When you talk about temptation to do something wrong, different people have different temptations, and different things are brought out by different temptations. And then, when you want to build a fence to protect yourself from it, you have to be very careful to build a fence in terms of what it is that the thing. As one person said to me once, if a person's doing something wrong and you want to get him to stop him doing what's wrong, first thing you ask yourself, what is it doing for him? What is it providing him with? Which then motivates him to do it. And then deal with that. One thing to do is to try to find something else that will satisfy that same motivation. So it relieves the pressure to do the wrong thing. But if you don't know what it's doing for him, then it can be very difficult to find a way to deal with it. So that's the aspect that you want to focus on. So you don't go into it brute force. You really have to go into it analytically, all the way through. Yeah. What's noch? Yeah.
When I was young, I remember when I used to wake up, I would jump out of the bed with energies. And today I find myself a lot of time, pressing the snooze button and find it hard to wake up. Are there any practical tips on how to overcome that laziness in the morning?
Well, first of all, I hope you're not in the same position that he was in, but you're just not sleeping enough hours. Then it's not laziness. Then it's the fact that you need sleep. If you cut down on your sleep and you find it difficult to get up, you should sleep more. That's one thing. By the way, you should just know, in terms of halacha, when it says you should leap out of bed like a lion, it doesn't mean instantaneously on awakening. That's not healthy. That can actually be dangerous to you. Now, you should take a few seconds to make sure you're awake, and then, and then leap. Look before you leap. Now, people go through different phases in life, and they have different challenges in life. One thing that saps motivation and strength is repetition. And things suddenly becomes repetitive, and then if you do it by on an automatic pilot, then it's very hard to be excited about it because your mind and your heart really aren't there. If that's part of what's sapping the excitement, then you have to look for a way to restore the excitement. And there are methods for trying to do that. I'll share one with you. It's a good question, and being a psychological question, the more people you ask, probably the more insight you'll get. Let's take prayer. So the basic, by prayer, I mean strictly the Shemona Esrei, the silent prayer. It's the same words every day, 3 times a day. Well, let's take the one where you ask for health. Do you know people who aren't well? Do you care about them? Maybe about your own health? Think practically about people who need this. Not that everybody doesn't need it. I think it's for everybody, because the fact, you shouldn't say you are healthy. You should say, I have been healthy. Health is not guaranteed. You don't have it in your pocket. So, but leaving that aside, if there are people you care about, it's very hard to find someone who doesn't know anyone who has a health problem. Parents, grandparents, friends, various people. Think about them. Pause for a moment and think about them and care about them. Today we say, Riva Rivenu, we should fight our battle. And here we are, strictly embattled. And think about it. Think about what's going on. Identify with what's going on. And then, if the tefillah becomes meaningful to you that way, then you look forward to the next time to daven. You have to realize, maybe this takes time to learn about and internalize, when you are asking Kodesh Baruch Hu to make something happen, That's your effort to make it happen. It's what's called in Hebrew hishtadlus. You have to believe that your asking could make a difference. The Torah never asks you to do something that's absurd. If you were guaranteed that your asking could have no effect on the outcome, the Torah would not ask you to do it. Don't talk to me about chukim. A chok is something that you don't know the reason for, not something which you positively know is absurd. So, if you feel, here's my chance to do something for them, then you look at it as a precious opportunity. Let me give you a very, shall I say, emotional example of how this works from my own private personal experience. My parents were nifta within 6 months of each other, so I was mourning for them for 18 months. And I went through the Pnei Baruch, which is a compendium of laws of mourning, and he asked the following question. Usually, the person who's mourning leads the prayers. Okay, you may be in a congregation where there are a lot of people who are mourning, let's say for parents, and so they have to divide up the prayers. Ordinary week, there's 18 prayers, without holidays. If you're number one on the list, and you could choose the one out of the 18, which one should you choose? So I saw the question, and I thought, well, probably Monday or Thursday, because you're reading the Torah, and you have the long tachanun, you have extra brachos, and so on and so on. No, that's not the right answer. So then I was kind of lost. If that's not the right answer, well, maybe at least the daytime prayer all the time. No, it's wrong. Nighttime prayer? Yeah, but they're not all equal. One is more important than all the other ones. Which one is that? Saturday night. Daven the evening prayer Saturday night. That's it. You got it made. Really? Why is that? And the answer is that those who pass on and they're going through a reckoning of the things that they did, that reckoning doesn't take place on Shabbos. On Shabbos, there's a rest period. And Motzei Shabbos, they're going back into din, going back into that reckoning. If you do something in the name when they're going back into the reckoning, that's the maximum benefit you can have for that soul. And second best is Marav all week, because the reckoning is less powerful in the light part of the day and more powerful in the dark part of the day. So in the evening, you're going from light to dark. Again, doing something for that soul is a major contribution to that soul. Okay, so I read that. That's the halacha. Then I thought, wait a minute. This parent isn't in this world anymore. And I can still do something for that parent. I'm still connected. That was a very powerful insight. I'm still connected. So when I get up to pray, I'm actually doing something for that parent. So then you look forward to praying. Look forward to doing something which can do something that you really feel strongly about. So if you can make the prayers and the Shema and the rest personal in that way, live them in terms of your own personal life, that can increase your enthusiasm and energy for going to be able to do them. You can also, one other strategy that I know of, let's say, davening at 7:30, now the clock goes off at 7 o'clock, and you're tempted to push the snooze and get up later and so on and so on. Suppose you make an agreement with a friend to learn 10 minutes before davening, 10 to 7. Now the clock doesn't go off at 7:20. So now it doesn't go off at 7, it goes off 10 to 7. 10 to 7. You know, where's the snooze? Yeah, but Ruben's going to be there. Ruben's going to be there. And I'm not going to show up. I can't do that. Especially if you happen to like learning with Ruben, it's going to be a very pleasant experience. And you'll have a start to the day, and you'll feel good when you go into the tefillah with having learned something before. So that's another strategy that you could use to reawaken that excitement about getting out of bed in the morning. Well, I'm saying whatever you're going to do in shul, if it's to be something which excites you, something you feel strongly about, then you're going to have more energy to get out of bed when the alarm rings.
Yeah, but you do it like Gishma.
Oh, Gishma, I misheard you. Yes, that's right. Gishma, that's right. Right. Yeah. What was noch?
Questions?
I have a question. I just wanted to get clarity on about it. So for Davis, but after the parent has passed on, you're supposed to learn Mishnayos. And I've taken it upon myself basically to try and learn Mishnayos from my mother. But here in Yeshiva, it's, Gemara, should I, I was learning a lot more Mishnayos in the past, and now I'm learning a lot less. Is it more important to try and learn more Mishnayos, or go along with the Yeshiva and do more of the Gemara?
Go along with the Yeshiva and do more with the Gemara and dedicate it in your mind to your mother. When I give a shir on my parents' yahrzeit, I'd say that I'm dedicating this year to their, and it's not just learning; it's mitzvos. Any extra mitzvah that you do in the name, for the merit of your mother. But I would say to learn a little Mishnayos, maybe one a day. Don't give up the Mishnayos entirely. Learn one a day. But then when you sit down to learn, you're saying, I'm doing this for the merit of my mother. And that goes for the whole year. The Pnei Baruch says, you're supposed to say Kaddish. Saying Kaddish for a parent is the least you can do. The least. It's the same thing. It's very short. You learn it, you do it, But if you did it 3 times a day, it would take all of a minute and a half, sachakol. Leading the prayers is also important. Learning is more important. And any extra mitzvah, any extra chesed that you do, tzedakah that you do, any support for somebody, is something which is also going to count for that person's merit, because you're doing it because of their merit. You wouldn't do it otherwise. So the doing of the mitzvahs is much more important than the leading the prayers. Leading the prayers is more important than saying Kaddish. It's some people feel that's what Jews do. They say Kaddish. Mm-hmm. No, that's not a correct perception. Yeah.
Regarding the learning aspect of things, if you wanted to, let's say I wanted to learn Kings, Shmuel, Judges, does that count as learning Torah?
Absolutely. Learning Tanakh, learning what the prophet says, absolutely it counts as learning Torah. You have to do a little self-analysis. Where did that question come from? What's the background for which that question comes from? We know the background, but it's just, and then you should now sort of reorient yourself towards that background. It's absolutely learning Torah. I'll tell you something else which people don't understand. We had the difference of opinion between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Almost always we decide the law according to Beis Hillel. To the extent that if one of the Talmudic sages says, here's a general rule, and there's no dispute about it, and he's challenged, what do you mean there's no dispute about it? Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai disputed. And Beis Shammai is against you. The Gemara says what he said was correct. Because when you have a Mishnah, Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, and you pass like Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai Eina Mishnah. Very dramatic statement. So it's considered as if it were unanimous. Beis Shammai doesn't count as detracting from the unanimity of the decision. Okay, now that's the question. You get up in the morning and you make the bracha on learning Torah. You spend the whole day learning only Beis Shammai. Was that a bracha in vain? A bracha l'batala because you're only learning Beis Shammai? Absolutely not. In terms of being part of Torah, it's just as much a part of Torah as Beis Hillel. The part of Beis Hillel teaches us what to do. And in terms of what counts as a controversy, not. But these great people had these great positions and had these great ideas. It's absolutely genuine as learning Torah. I'll tell you something else, since we're talking about it. The Ramchal, in Derech Hashem, the way of God, in his chapter on learning Torah, talks about, includes in learning Torah what he calls Hoge b'Torah. And Hoge b'Torah, if it's the Tanakh, means saying the words even if you don't understand the meanings. That counts as learning Torah. Unbelievable. So maybe the word learning isn't the right word. But it's a contact with Torah. It doesn't work for what we call the oral tradition, but for the written Torah, even just saying the words counts as learning Torah. But no one, if you have the capacity to learn on a deeper level and you're just too lazy to use your mind, that's not appropriate. You should learn on with the maximum level that you can. But if you don't have it, you shouldn't feel that you're left out and you're missing out and you're not really in contact with Torah because you're not doing it on that level. That's simply not true. Yeah.
So, I've heard this idea. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. It's not an area of interest for me. But we have this idea, especially in Ashkenaz culture, where we kind of avoid any kind of Kabbalah or Kabbalistic stuff at all costs until you reach, let's say, a certain level, 40 plus, learn it, you know what you're talking about, you have the basics more than down. Whereas in the Sephardi culture, it's it's everywhere. From a young age, they learn midrashos and all these different things. Why are Rebbeim so? I mean, I get it if somebody's going to go in the wrong direction with it, but if somebody just wants to learn a little bit deeper, for example, Arizal or one of these very big Mikvahs, why is it so?
So I don't want to answer your question and give the impression that, and this is what's right and the other isn't correct. And you asked the question very well. In the Sephardi world, Kabbalah is everywhere. Up the hill here is the Bukharim Shuk, and I used to live behind the Yeshiva when I first came on Aliyah. I was up there between Mincha and Mariv. I used to daven there from time to time. It's kind of dusky, and then a kid comes up to me, maybe he was 10, 11, and he said to me, "Why do we daven Mariv?" Total stranger, right? Why do we daven Mariv? So I said, well, Shachus and Mincha is a mitzvah, and Mariv is Rishus, and I started to explain the halacha. No. Parts of Atik is together with parts of, and the Spheros, and gives me this long Kabbalistic formula, which at that time I didn't understand a word, and then he just walks off into the dusk and disappears. What's going on here? Why did he approach me? I'm a total stranger, and then rattle this thing off and then just walk off and disappear? So yeah, for them it's huh? I don't know. At the time, I was not myself schooled at the Kabbalah at the time. I didn't know what he was talking about. I just recognized some of the words, but I know that they do that. Hasidim, much of the time, will present what you might call Kabbalah light. That is to say, they'll take Kabbalistic ideas and use them to illuminate and deepen our appreciation of Nigla ideas, whether it's
Tanya and Hasidus.
Well, I'm not. No, Tanya's sort of on the. It's in a slightly different realm. Maybe Tanya. Tanya's a pretty tough sefer. It's a very deep sefer. But they take it to illuminate the mitzvahs that we do, or the verses that we say, or the prayers that we say, rather than straight Arizal, which is often very, very deep, complex, tough mathematical structure of very unfamiliar concepts. So the Hasidim do that in their Sfarim. You say the Ashkenazim, I think you're basically right about the Ashkenazim, although the Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim Volozhin wrote the Nefesh HaChaim, so that the Ashkenazi world would have a sefer in which basic Kabbalistic ideas are available to them. I'm sorry? And from an Ashkenazi point of view, and he has 4 chapters in there, and 2 chapters are really real Kabbalah, straight Kabbalah, and the other 2 chapters explain the implications. Not a very big book, but it's certainly a presentation of Kabbalah for Ashkenazim. Now, it could be that the general attitude is don't learn the Nefesh Chaim until you're at a certain age. Now, one of the things they're worried about, but again, I'm not saying this makes their position right because there are too many others who look at it differently. One of the things we're worried about is this. Let's take imagine a person makes a mistake in Hilchos Netilas Yadayim. Which hand are you supposed to pick the cup up with? Well, Yeshomrim, pick it up with the right hand and put it in the left hand and then wash the hand right. And he picks it up with the wrong hand. He's done it wrong. He's done it wrong. He hasn't done, he washed his hands, right? And it was a cup and everything else, but he picked it up with the wrong hand, right? Okay. Now, suppose somebody makes a mistake in Kabbalah. Well, a lot of Kabbalah is describing how God expresses himself in the world and how his actions affect the world. And if you get something wrong there, you might not be dedicating your service to the right God. It might be the wrong God. Because you think God is like this and God is really like that. So the size of the consequences of the error are really not comparable. The analogy that some people give is, a person's driving a car, holding the wheel, and he has a twitch in which he moves the wheel 10 degrees to the right by accident when he didn't mean to. How bad is that? Well, it depends upon how fast he's going, doesn't it? If he's going 70 miles an hour, that could be death. If he's going 5 miles an hour, it probably won't be death. So, it's the same 10 degrees, but it doesn't have the same effect. So here, you're dealing with things that are central to your entire service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and your conception of who the service is dedicated to. A mistake on that level is really quite serious. Furthermore, those people who wrote Kabbalistic works first knew everything about the Gemara and the Rishonim and all the rest. So they were taking that all into account. And if you don't know that, it's very, very likely that you will misunderstand what they say. Many, many years ago, I met a fellow who was about Teshuva, and for whatever reason, he decided he wanted to read the Tanya. And he once made a remark to me that non-Jews are animals. I said, what? Non-Jews are animals. Oh, you don't know? Oh, the Tanya says that non-Jews have animal souls and human beings have holy souls. Non-Jews are animals. I started to protest. He says, I understand you because you spend most of your day together with non-Jews. So you become accustomed to them and you become friendly with them. You can be friendly with your dog also. But they're all animals. I was really like, so I got my feet back on the ground and I said, gee, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave commandments to non-Jews. Last time I checked, he didn't give any commandments to animals. Non-Jews can go into the world to come. I don't think there are any cows in the world to come. Are you sure that, that what you're talking about is correct? He didn't hear me. He didn't care about what I said because it says so in the Tanya. I tried to suggest to him, maybe you don't understand what the Tanya is saying because the Tanya knew what I just told you. And he writes this anyway. Maybe it doesn't mean, that they're just like dogs, exactly. Didn't hear me, didn't care about what I said, had no impact on him. Well, I don't know if he's getting a lot positive out of the Tanya, to tell you the truth.
That's why you guys...
So one of the reasons why you don't start off with that, because it presumes the background of everything else, and you don't have the background of everything else. So you're going to make mistakes. Now, maybe the point's a little softer than it sounds. Whatever you learn, you're going to make mistakes. We say a person does not come to stand on the words of Torah until he tripped up by them. Okay, but not all mistakes are equal. Not all mistakes are equal. Here he's reading an English translation of the Tanya, thinks he understands the word, thinks he understands the concept, and he just gets it wrong. So that's going to happen a lot when you aren't trained in the basics beforehand. That's one of the things that this yeshiva dedicated itself to, is to teach the things that every Jew needs to know. Every Jew needs to know this. Whether you go off to become a Sephardi or a Yek or Hungarian or a Chassid, but this you need to know. basic hashkafa you need to know, basic Hebrew you need to know how Gemara works and how halacha works, and basic facts about the holidays. Without that, you can't be a Jew. So we're filling in what we call Shavah l'chol nefesh. It's equal to every soul. Everybody has to have it. And the other things, I do recommend, if people are interested in it, there's a wonderful sefer you can get. There's a Shem Shmuel from the Sochachov dynasty, and what's his name? The Rav in London, as a shul there, took a collection of his writings and translated into English. He's a first-rate Talmid Chacham, and if you want to get an idea of Chassidus, Shem Shmuel is easier. He explains more. His thought process is more open and explicit than something like the Tanya, where you really have to work very hard to penetrate what the Tanya was. It's Shem Shmuel in English. Yeah,
British writer.
Yeah, a British author. Yeah, I mean translator.
It wasn't like Rabbi or Jonathan Sachs.
No, it was not Rabbi Sachs. No, as far as I know, he's still alive. I once did a Shabbaton in his shul. By the way, Shmuel is spelled Shin Mem Aleph Vav Lamed, right? And Shem is spelled Shin Mem. So Shem Mishmuel refers to a law of Shabbos. Are you guilty of violating the law of not writing on Shabbos if you write two letters which spell a word, but that's not the word you're writing? You're writing Shmuel, and then you get stopped in the middle. So you didn't write the word you were planning to write. You wrote two letters that are another word which you weren't planning to write. Does that mean that you violated the law of it? So Shem Mishmuel that's what he called the name of his sefer. It's very, I would say, popular sefer. It's in Hebrew. It's not difficult to read, and it has ideas which are explained in a way that you can understand them, and very inspiring ideas. I mean, I quote him a lot. So I would. Sfas Emes is also, Sfas Emes is translated, but Sfas Emes is much harder.
That's like the higher level of the Kabbalah-esque basics.
I wouldn't talk levels. He talks about deep things very briefly. He's hard to read, hard to understand. They're both great people, both great rebbes, but it's just one is easier, one is harder. Yeah.
By that, I've never understood it, because that's what I've always heard is the reason why you don't learn Kabbalah, is because you don't know what a person might take from that teaching. But if you learn it with a rabbi who is well versed in these things and understands the person's level that they're talking to, shouldn't they be able to tell it over in the right way?
Shouldn't they be able to tell right? I suppose that's correct. Of course, if he's learning with a rabbi one-on-one, that's one thing. If he's listening to the rabbi talk to 20 people, it's another thing altogether. And that won't qualify. When I first came to this yeshiva, I said something in a shir, and the student said, "Wow, the other rabbi said the opposite of you." I said, "Really? He did?" I couldn't imagine that. So I called him up. I said, "Did you say ABC?" He said, "Of course not. I would never say that." I said, "Well, I was giving a shir, and one of the students said, you said ABC. He said, "Let me think for a second. I got it now. I said PQR. He misunderstood PQR as XYZ, and then he drew a false conclusion from XYZ of ABC. That's why he said ABC. That's what he did. That's what he did. I got used to that. It happens a lot. You're beginners. You're going into a field you're unfamiliar with. You're not familiar even with the methodology or the vocabulary of the words. You hear something, you use your experience and your mental tools to understand what you hear. So now let's suppose he explains it to you, and taking into account who you are, knows how you think, explains it to you so that you understand it. But does that prevent you from drawing other conclusions from it which will be mistaken? Probably not. Probably not. So then you'll end up with mistakes anyway. It's very, very difficult. I went through this personally. I spent a year in yeshiva after my BA, And I spent a lot of time on Gemara. I was very happy with learning Gemara. I'm a logician and a philosopher, so it's really very good for me. It was a piece of Gemara that I was very happy with, and I learned it. And the next 5 years, anybody I could get to sit down with me, I would teach them that piece of Gemara. After 5 years, I found out I had it wrong. I missed the trick, and I missed the nuance, and I missed the reference, and I just built my own castle in the air. So these things are really very tricky. They're very tricky. So when you know that this sits close to the top of the pile, the top of the scholarship, and everything else below it is part of what is taken for granted, then you realize that you need a lot. Again, the Tanya starts off with a definition of Tzaddik, Rasha, and Beinoni, which is almost completely unique. Tzaddik is a person who has no struggle to do everything right. Nothing tempts him, nothing influences him, he just does what's right. Beinoni is someone who always does what's right. He's Beinoni, sort of in the middle. Average, he always does what's right, but he struggles. It's hard. It's a fights with him, and he has to fight to do it. And the Rasha, the wicked one, is someone who sometimes does things wrong. So now, you read that in the Tanya, you say, okay, the Tanya is telling me what it is. Yeah, but 99% of other sources won't agree with those definitions. So you have to ask yourself, so what's the Tanya doing? What does he communicate? What's he trying to communicate to me? He knew all those other sources. He chose this definition. He had a reason for that. You don't understand why he chose this definition as against all the other ones. And again, it might not be that to disagree. It might be that he's talking about a different subject. Well, then you have to know the subject. Wouldn't you want to know the subject? And no, it wasn't those subjects. And if it isn't a disagreement, when you read the other ones and you think it's a disagreement, you're going to get that wrong. So, if you're not even aware that what he's doing is almost completely unique, that you're just lost. You don't know what you're talking about. So, I worked for a couple of times on the Tanya, 3 times actually. I went through it. Couldn't get it. I can't say that I have any grasp of it. There's certain types of writings where you read a chapter can be 1 or 2 pages. So you read a chapter. Got it. Another chapter. You say, wait a second. This is what he said over here. Then how did he say that over there? And you go back and you try to make the chapters work together, and then it gets hard. And then it starts getting more and more difficult and confusing and so forth and so on. So I never was zeicha to catch it. So I'm that's why I'd be reluctant to say that people should just take it. But you put the question very well, because people quote the Shach, the great halakha commentator, the Shach, and he said you shouldn't start reading Kabbalah until you're 40. What does that mean? That all the Sfardim and all the Hasidim are all going to go to Gehenna, God forbid, because they didn't do what the Shach said? No. Shach is one opinion for one particular slice of Klal Yisrael, for a certain type of spirit of avoda, and there are other ones. A Sephardi doesn't have to follow the Shach. He has his own poskim. He has his own rabbanim. So that too is something which, unless you understand how Klal Yisrael works, where there are different rabbanim and different strategies of learning, and so strategies of avoda, you won't understand that either. Okay, so things are complicated. One rule that I usually mention to people is, if you ask a question about the Torah and you get a simple answer, it's wrong. Things aren't simple. They just aren't simple. Okay, yeah, last question.
Would you say that the book that Avraham Avinu wrote, the letters, is that considered Kabbalah?
First of all,
or that we think he wrote?
Yeah, I think he wrote, or it's just ascribed to him. I'm not aware that we have a position that it is. So the question is, who's the author, and what level is it? What level is it? when I first started learning this area of limud, I asked my Rabbi Zatzal, and he said the Bala Sulam, the one who wrote the parish of the Sulam on the entire Zohar, wrote introductions to various works that he had. And those introductions were gathered together in one sefer. So you're just reading introductions. And in the introductions, he explains himself to a reader who needs an introduction. And it was very helpful. It was very helpful. Now we have the Masach Midvash, which is very, very popular, and he wrote introductory works. And there are places also where you can get this introduction to the structure. What is a sphera? What is a partzuf? What is an olam? How many olamos are there? How are they related to one another? But that's like sort of seeing the parts that make up a laser on a desk, and so being told, this is the chip, and this is the lens, but you know what the chip does. You know what the lens does. But I can recognize them. My children. Do you know what a pickle is? He said, yeah. In the store there are cans, and it says Pickles. That's pickles is what's in the can. Yeah, you know how to find them, but you don't know what a pickle is. Is it animal, vegetable, or mineral? Don't know. Is it alive or dead? Don't know. Can you eat it or not? Don't know. I just know it's the jar in the can that says pickles. Well, you can find them in the store that way. That's not called knowing what it is. So it's a very complex, multidimensional study. Very complex and multidimensional. Very difficult. Okay. See you tomorrow.